Welcome back guys to Cool Rangers, and today we're going to be, are you stuck in your middle games? Can't you find a plan? So we're going to be looking at plans in the middle game and how we can use and utilize our short-term, middle-term and long-term plans to help us get where we want in the middle game. So here we have a position on the board. As you can see, it's white to play. And what I want you to do here is create a plan for white. So you're going to create a short-term plan for white, a middle-term plan for white, and a long-term plan for white. So in your head, you will be looking at the imbalances in the position, right? So first of all, we can look at the imbalances in the position. First, we look at material. Is the material equal? Yes, the material is very much equal. So while you're going through this, you're still creating a plan in your head, right? So the next one is piece activity. Is my piece active enough? Yes, my knight is more active than his knight. My bishop is active, and also my rooks. My rooks are kind of active as well. You have to look at king safety. Is my king safe? Is my opponent's king safe? Your opponent's king is safe, but you can look and see that he has weak dark squares around his king side, right? Also, you can look. Also, you can look at piece. Are my pieces good or are my pieces bad? Also, you can see that these pieces aren't bad, but they could be better, and your pieces could also be better as well, right? So you're creating a plan, and once in the game you're creating a short-term plan, you can look for what your opponent wants. Let's see what does black want in the game. Black wants to start what we call minority attack on the queen side of the board. As you can see, black can't really pressure white on the king side because black king is going to be weaker by starting an attack over on the queen side of the board, because all of white on the king side of the board, because all of white pieces points towards the black's king side, while most of black pieces are pointing towards white's queen side, the queen side, right? So black just played the move pawn to a5. He's looking to soften up these pawns here. So black is also just looking to play b4, trying to have white have a backward pawn and an isolated pawn. So by playing b4, let's say black trades, white trades on b4, black captures back, and if white doesn't capture, let's say white just plays a move like f3, black is just going to capture here, and white is going to be stuck with this weak c3 pawn that's isolated. That is a backward pawn, right? Because he can't really go forward and he's stuck. And if he goes forward, he's going to be captured right here. So look, right here. So you realize black's idea. That's black's main middle plan. That's your short-term middle plan, long-term plan. Their short-term plan is just to solve up these pawns, and their long-term plan is to target your weak c3 pawn in the long run, right? That's a simple plan for black. Do you realize how we dissect that simple plan here for black? Now we have to find a plan for white. What is the plan here for white? Can you figure out what is the plan here for white? What would you play here for white? Short-term plan, you need to put pressure on the king side. So that's your middle term. That's your plan here. So the move here for white is obviously pawn to g4. Right. So the move here for white is pawn to g4. Why? Because all of your pieces are pointing towards black's queen side of the board. So you have to go over there and attack the queen side. So you have to play moves like g4 and h4 and h5, g5. You have to start what we call a pawn storm, right? We know a storm is something is very catastrophic, right? So you have to use your pawns to break open the king side for black, because your king is actually safe right now. Let's see what black continues with. Black plays rook c to b8. So now you're looking at this, and that's for example, you're looking at this move and you're like, that can't be good for black, because now you're looking for a short-term plan. And your short-term plan is very simple here. What is protecting this square? And every time we move a piece, we have to say to ourselves, is that square a safe square? And yes, right now, rook b8 is a safe square. Nothing, you can't capture the rook on b8. But no, it is in fact, it is not really a safe square. Reason why it's not really a safe square is because you have one defender defending that square here, because your knight wants to jump here to fork the queen and the rook to win an exchange. And his knight is the only one defending the d7 square. And you just play the move g4, pawn to g4. Now, a simple move, pawn to g5, is going to allow you to win the, the exchange on b8. Black continues with g8, forks, you win the piece, and now you're up material. So when you're up material, what do? Yes, trade. You always ask for trades. So queen to f3, white is trading another plan. What is the plan here for white? It's the same thing. You're trying to get some open lines here for your pieces. So you want to play h4, h5, maybe capture here, and then afterwards swing your queen to h3 or play king g2 with the idea of playing rook h1 and putting and doubling up on this and playing queen to g8. You want to put pressure here on the king side of the board for black. So that's the simple plan here. Pawn to e6, and also we were attacking the pawn here on d5 that was unprotected. So queen went to g3, looking for a trade, queen back to d8. So now, because black doesn't want to trade queens, because if he trades queens, this is just completely winning for white, right? So because black doesn't want to trade, black has to make his queen a bit passive. White continues with his plan, pawn to h4. Still trying, that is whole goal here. He's trying to open up the king side to get a massive advantage so he can either play for checkmate or use his initiative to stop black from getting any type of what we like to call counterplay. Pawn to b4, black is continuing with their plan. Captures, pawn to h4. Pawn to h4 is still trying to open up the lines. He wants to capture, play queen here to attack the pawn, and then look at the bishop. It's also looking at the h7 pawn to win the h7 pawn here. Capture, queen there, pawn to h6. Why did black do it? Black just want a pawn. He normally just want white to capture the pawn here on h5 and to maybe trade off queens off the board here in this position. But white doesn't want to do that, so white continues pawn to f4, protecting the pawn and also still keeping an eye on the h5 pawn. You're going to win the h5 pawn back. Capture, pawn captures, queen comes up to d6, and now the queen is looking for some type of perpetual check. Check here to win the bishop. White continues with rook to f1, putting pressure now on the f7 square. So look at how white open up black's king side of the board, right? The king side is so open now on the board. You have to ask yourself and say that, is black king safe? Yes, your king is wide open as well, but your attack is just more devastating, more here than black. Pawn captures on c3, queen captures on h5. Yes, if he captures here on b2, that is good for white because white is threatening checkmate in one move. So remember, threats, captures, checks, captures, and threats. You have to remember that rule here. So he doesn't mind giving away the pawn. White doesn't mind giving away the pawn because his threat is checkmate, and black has to deal with the checkmate. Black plays knight to d8, and look at these knights. Are these knights good? Well, this knight is defending this, but it could be doing better. It's not active. That's the whole point. It's not active. And once you can push back your opponent's pieces and stop them from being active, you can always control what your opponent does. Queen to h7 check, king back to f8, pawn captures on c3. Now that's a mistake here for white. White doesn't necessarily need to capture here first. White can continue with the plan of pawn push to g6. That would be the better move here. Why is that the better move? You're putting pressure, you're putting 3-time pressure on the pawn on f7. Even a move that doesn't, let's say, even a move as sacrifice doesn't work because capture here, and if you go pawn push, you don't really have to sacrifice any pieces. You just have to is pin piece. Remember rules. If a piece is pinned, you want to put pressure on the pin piece. So pawn to g6 is the move here. If you're worried about queen to g3 check, doesn't really do much for you. You just play king to h1. Remember, this is your threat. You're threatening to check me. They can't black cannot capture here because your bishop can capture and also your queen can capture on g6. If black defends it and play rook to f7, this you still can't play pawn push because black is just going to take the pawn. You can play pawn captures actually. Reason being why pawn captures works is because now they still cannot capture on d3 because one, your queen is protecting it, and these are all plans right here. This is short-term plan because you're threatening to checkmate right here. You're threatening to play pawn captures on g8, promoting to a queen or a rook, double check, and also checkmate the king. So what would black have to do? Black would more than likely capture back with his knight. Right? And now the move, pawn captures on c3. Pawn captures on c3 is you're trying to do what we call a distraction. You want the rook to capture on b1, and then you're going to play queen. It's called removing of the guard, removing of the defender. It's a distraction and removing of the defender. You want to remove the defender. And also you want the open file for your rook. There's no more checks. Well, there's checks here for black, but there's no more safe checks here for black, right? So you can realize in the middle game, this will just be an over game because black cannot move the rook. Black will have to move the rook out the way. And you will just add another attacker to the pin piece here. One, you're blocking out the queens from protecting the g8 knight. Also, you're adding another attacker here on this piece, right? Also, you don't have to play this. You could also, once the rook moves, this is just game over. Rook check. The king has to come up. You do have queen check, but you can go rook check. Rook check is also, and then the king will have to move again, and rook check here. The rook has to block, and then this now is check. So you realize how simple plans can help you. Yes, black blundered in an exchange, but you have to start with a plan. The plan for white was to use his pieces that was pointing towards the black's king side, and black's lack of dark square safe, black's dark square weaknesses, right? So that was the plan for white, and yes, it helped white because black dropped an exchange, but it also helped. Also, black was forced into dropping that. Really not really forced, but black needed to get his rooks over to the queen side because that was black's idea. But g4 was the move. If you had found g4, leave it in the comment section. Guys, that is how to create a plan in the middle game. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. See you guys later.